Welcome everyone and welcome to this week's F1 Fix Setup Track Guide. We are at the Nurburgring this week, a track that really does suit this car and is a real joy to drive around. I feel like I say that every week, but this track in particular does have a bit of everything, so really looking forward to the officials this week. As always, we set track conditions as per the iRacing schedule. This time around, it chucked out a track temperature of 22 degrees. That's why we are running the red wall tyre, the soft tyre, more than enough to get us through a fixed race distance. Although, do be careful guys this week of those front tyres. This track is quite punishing on them and it's very easy to lock up those fronts as well. So be careful there. Now, the lap time I set was a 1:24.8. That is with, of course, the fixed setup, as the title suggests, which means we are stuck in balanced ERS mode, battery deployment mode, and we also have a full tank of fuel. So yeah, not a bad lap time. As always, we're gonna see that from cockpit view, then we're gonna see it from a far chase camera angle, and finally, we're gonna analyze that lap, see how we put it together, and keep an eye out for our braking markers and little tidbits here and there in how to make you more consistent and hopefully faster at the same time around the Nurburgring this week. So yeah, lo and behold guys, let's get into it. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button, turn those notifications on and enjoy. So guys, that was the hot lap from cockpit view and far chase camera angle. Let's see how we put it all together. Now, first things first, as always, my brake bias, I make you guys aware of what I've got it set to. That is the one thing we can change in the fix setup. I've got it set to 53, as you can see from the orange number on the dash. That is as far back as we can move the brake bias, so to the rear of the car, and that is because this track is very hard on the front tyres, very easy to lock them up. So for me, moving it as far back as we can just gave me much more control under braking and avoided those lockups to the front tyres. Of course, some of you like it further forward and can make that work. That's brilliant. That's entirely up to you. Brake bias is a personal preference, as I say in every track guides. Go out there, practice, play around with it and see what works for you. So moving on, as we have just come out of the last corner, I want to bring your attention to our first DRS zone. There are two DRS zones on this track, one down the main straight and one down the back straight, or the dogleg right. And this comes upon you very quickly out of the last corner. Now, of course, the last corner we will get to at the end of the lap analysis, and you'll see how quickly this comes upon you. But just be aware that as you come out of the last corner, this is here very quickly, and of course you want to be straight on applying that DRS as quickly as you can as soon as you hit the line, because every little millisecond counts in this car, as we know. So as you can see, as we play it down the main straight, hanging over to the left hand side, and you can see the 4 green lights on the dash indicates that we've got our DRS open. And we're coming down into the first corner, which is, for me, the most difficult corner on the track. The first sector is quite slow, twisty, turny, and personally, it's where most people, myself included, lose all their time. If you're wondering why you're slower generally than the faster guys, or anyone who's faster than you, it's because they are quicker through this section. There's not much really in it between the fast guys or someone who's around the same pace of you in the second to third sector. It's all gained and lost in this first sector. It generally always is in the slower corners because they're more intricate, and there's no more intricate corner than the first corner. So what we're keeping an eye out for is the 100 bald marker, and that is where we're going to be braking, as you can see from our inputs. Braking in a straight line, hugging the curb on the left hand side, and we're going to be shifting down into second gear here. Now you want to start turning in really when the bollard is right above your wheel or in your peripheral vision. Should always be looking into the apex anyway. And the reason this corner is so difficult is because, one, you're pretty much going 180. You're pretty much going back on yourself from where you've just come from. And there's a big dip here that in GT3s or LMP2 cars, we can kind of get on this curb and ride that bump, but we can't do that in this car. So really, if you are over this curb here, you're going to throw the car off, and as soon as you get back on the throttle, the rear of the car is going to be bouncing up and down, and you're going to leave yourself vulnerable to just spinning the car. This is where, of course, you see most of the crashes on this track on the first lap down to the first corner, because people just, one, they just pile straight into the back of one another, and because it is a slow corner, or they spin it on exit. So just be careful, guys. So as you can see, we're not tight to the apex, but we're tight enough, allowing the car, as you can see, I'm off the brake, so just rewind that back. We're trail braking here in second gear as we get to the corner. Now this is important. You may have just seen there, I've short shifted into third gear. Now the reason I did that is because by short shifting into third gear, I've limited the revs. So what it allows me to do, as I said, it's very easy to spin the car here when you're getting on the throttle. is it just allows me to limit the torque in the engine, and I'm able to get on the throttle a lot easier and be comfortable in the traction and the power of the car without it spinning. So short shifting into third gear before you get to the corner, all the while trail braking. And then you see as you get down the dip, we're then on the throttle, easing on the throttle even though we're still in third gear, and we're limiting that torque and those revs. Because if I got on full throttle there, the car's just going to spin. Quickly unwind the steering wheel, get it in a relatively straight line, and then you can trust the traction of the rear tyres and get on full throttle. Then very quickly we are moving the car over to the right hand side, or middle right hand side. We don't want to be all the way over because you're just covering unnecessary track and you're going to lose time. And you're going to be in fourth gear, and then just as you see the apex come into view, you're going to lift off the throttle. Slightly dabbing the brakes, covering the brake. See, I'm ever so slightly covering the brake just to get the nose of the car pointing in. You can do this without touching the brake, but just for safety, just cover the brake a little bit, keeping it tight to the apex. And then this is the killer here, guys. So another corner that is very easy to get on the throttle too early and spin the car. So we need a point ahead of us to kind of know when to get on the throttle, because it is a blind corner. You can't really see the exit until you're upon it. So you need to trust your throttle input points, is what I'm going to call it. So we want to pick a point in the distance that when our car reaches it, that's when we can get on the throttle, because we've gone around the corner far enough to be comfortable that we're not going to run out of track and we're not going to spin the car. So what I keep an eye out on personally is in the distance here, is this brake in the barriers. Now I'm assuming that's probably a marshal's hut in the distance. I don't know, it's a grey square. But that, when that gets into kind of relatively the center of my screen, that's when I'm getting on throttle, unwinding the steering wheel, and I know that I've gone far enough around the corner that I'm not going to run out of track, because it's very easy to pick up a 1x here on the exit. So you have to be careful there, especially in your qualifying sessions, because your lap could be over before it's even begun. And we are tight to the curb. Now, careful here, guys, because you can get on this curb. Of course, you don't want all four wheels over the white line because that is an off track. But what I have found is that if you get the middle of the car while still having two wheels on the track, you don't actually, it's very difficult to get off the curb. It's like it just gets sucked in. The floor of the car just rides the curb because of the ride height, and you can't turn in as quickly as you would like. So be careful there. Really, in an ideal world, you want to keep the middle of the car on the black stuff. You can get two wheels on the red and white curb, but you want the middle of the car on the black stuff so that you stop the floor from getting sucked into that red and white curb. We'll just pull this back a little bit, and you can see here we're in fifth gear, just getting to sixth. And then as we're just approaching, you can see here the dark green AstroTurf, just before it's running out, that's when we're starting to brake. There is unfortunately kind of no visual braking marker here per se of where you want to brake exactly, but it's as you're fast approaching here, you want to be braking before the end of the dark green AstroTurf, turning in before it as well into our next slow hairpin, and we're going to be into third gear, trail braking round. And what we want to do is we want to get two wheels along this red and white curb. So there's just inside the red and white curb is like a black drain, little black drain that runs along the inside of this hairpin at this curb, as you can see. And that's where you want to be aiming to get your inside wheels on, your left wheels, because we want to keep it tight around this hairpin so that we're opening up our angle of attack for the right hander. Because if we run wide here, we're just going to be too tight to the right hander and just cost ourselves a load of time. So as we're going around here, another little key point is I short shift once again into 4th gear. I'm just limiting that torque, limiting those revs, and it gives me more control under throttle or on throttle. And you can see there, getting on throttle, covering the brake a little bit too long, bit of a bad habit of mine, but I'm overlapping my brake and my throttle inputs, costing myself time there, something I need to practice and work on. But you can see we're nice and tight on the exit here, not much room between us and the curb. And you'll see that I don't actually get full throttle on into 4th gear. Very nearly, but we have a slight lift. Once again, we can cover the inside of this curb, not too much because you'll gain another off track, but you can see we get over it all the while on around about half throttle, just under. The car will unsettle a bit, bobble up and down. Be careful when you're getting back on the throttle. It's very easy to spin the rear. And then once the car's straight, you can get on full throttle. Now you'll see here perfectly, the car was still kind of bobbling up and down, and I got on full throttle too early while the car was still settling, and that just snapped the rear. We managed to keep a hold of it, but that did cost me a little bit of time. So as I said, you want to make sure the car's settled before you really get on full throttle. So a bit of patience is required. And that is your first sector. If you can hook that up, it really does feel good, and it's very rewarding, and that's where a lot of your time will be made up, especially if you're chasing someone down. So keep it tight, short shift into those gears, 3rd gear, short shift into 3rd gear as you're going through the corner or the first corner, and then short shift into 4th when you're going through the 2nd hairpin, because it just makes a world of difference and gives you that much more control. So heading down into the next corner. Now this is an overtaking opportunity here if you get a good run on someone out of the last corner. What we keep an eye out for is these cones on the right hand side. Just as we get past those, as you can see, that's where we want to brake. Very fast left-hander, shifting down into 2nd, a little bit of trail braking to control the front nose of the car, get it pointing in. And then as you can see, as we get tight to the apex, we're back on full throttle. Because we want to keep the car tight to the left-hand side. We don't need to be all the way over to the curb, because if we were, we'd be taking too much speed off of the car. But we want to be middle left-hand side so that we can open up the right-hander very quickly. On the brakes again as we got round that corner just before the end, just before we reach the end of the red and white curb on the left-hand side. And you can see I've actually got the car here pointing middle left. So that's what you want to be aiming for. And then we shift down into 3rd gear. Now I have tried going around this corner in 4th gear. I was just carrying too much speed. I wasn't able to slow the car down enough in 4th gear, and was locking up the front right, which of course you don't want to do because you want to maintain as much tyre as you can, and of course you don't want to miss the apex. So shifting down into 3rd gear, even though while you're still kind of quite high in the revs, it just engine brakes the car and just allows you to slow down that little bit much more to hit this nice apex. So as you can see, trail braking round, just covering the brake there, and then as the middle of the car points towards the red and white curb that is on the far side, that's when you can get on full throttle. That's when you can trust the downforce, get on full throttle, Very quickly shift up into 4th gear because, as you can see, we're at the rev limiter there. Something to be aware of. And then use the runoff and make our way down to the next corner. So that corner is very much about trusting, those last couple of corners is very much about trusting the downforce of the car. The fast left-hander, you can actually trust the downforce too much. Very easy to think that the car can kind of take it flat out or with a lot more speed. I've tried in practice, it can't. So you do need to just shift down into 6th, take a little bit more speed off of it than you first think, and well, in my instance I did, and yeah, then very quickly down the gears and back on the power, trusting the downforce. So we're moving the car over to the left hand side here because this is a bit of a weird, not a weird right-hander, but it's a right-hander that we don't need to be tight to the entry of the apex. It's a late apex. So we are braking. Our braking point is, as you can see, this concrete. You can see it changes from a dark shade to, I don't know, almost like tiles. Bit weird, but you can see that there's a differentiation here of where one ends and one begins. And just as we're approaching this, that's where we're braking, as you can see. And then we want to point the car into the middle of the track, shifting down into 3rd gear, and you can see we're not tight to the apex here, not tight, because if you're tight to the apex, you're then going to end up wide of the 2nd apex or the exit. So it's a wide entry, and then you slowly bring it back round to the apex on exit, and you can see here this is a corner where you need to trust the downforce. Now in GT3s or an LMP2 car, vice versa, wherever it may be, you would not be getting on throttle until the middle of the car is pointing towards the red and white curb on the far side. That's not the case. Once again, trust the downforce here, guys. So as you reach kind of the peak of the apex and you hit that apex, that's when you can get on throttle. Not quite full throttle yet because you've still got a lot of steering input. We don't want to spin the car. And then slowly, as you're applying more throttle, open up the steering, use the runoff, shifting up the gears, and then it's a nice flat out clean run through the Schumacher S's. So tight to the apex, don't get it up on the curb because it's very raised. You can cut the curb a little bit there, move the car over to the right hand side, and then we come to a very fast left and right hander leading us down to the back straight or back dogleg. Now I want to keep an eye out for the 100 ball marker. Braking on it in a straight line, shift down into 5th gear, trusting the downforce here, tight to the apex. You can get 2 wheels over this green and white curb on the green curb here on the inside. You won't get an off track, but you do not gain any time. It's slightly raised, there's not a lot of traction there, so it's not worth it, unlike in other series. So we want to keep it on the red and white stuff. You can see down into 5th, back on the throttle just as we hit the apex or just before it. On full throttle, and then very quickly keeping that left steering angle and pointing the car over to the left hand side. Now in some instances you may not carry enough speed through there because you had to brake more because of other people, because of guys in front of you, and you might not reach 6th gear. I do shift up into 6th gear here because you do, in that very short instance, you do reach the limit of 5th gear. But very quickly I am back down into 5th gear and turning in just, so you're pointing the car to the edge of the track here. It seems a bit strange because obviously it's a right-hander and we're pointing the car left, but you're pointing the car and turning in and wanting to kind of really brake and shift into 5th when the edge of the track here kind of bends round to the right. If we move it back just a touch, you can see it kind of goes straight and then just jinks off to the right. So we're braking just before it, shifting down into fifth, trail braking ever so slightly just to get the front nose of the car turning in. And then before you reach the apex, you should be looking for the apex, guys, but in your peripheral vision, if you've got your objects turned on, you'll see these flagpoles in the distance. That's when you can get on the throttle. You can plant the throttle, trust the downforce, tie it to the apex, unwind the steering wheel, and then it's DRS zone activated all the way down to the chicane. Prime overtaking opportunity, just like it is into the first corner. There's a good few overtaking opportunities around this track. Do like the Nurburgring. And then we're heading into the tight chicane that will see plenty of death here. So keep an eye out for the 100 ball marker, and we brake just after it. Now, to be safe, I would brake on it if you're not comfortable with your braking and your downshifts, because here it does require some quite hard braking and a lot of quick downshifts, because we're going to shift all the way from 8th gear down into 2nd in a very short space of time. So you can see we're very high here in our brake input, and we're shifting all the way down into 2nd while braking in a straight line. And then we're turning in as we see the apex of the curb, and we don't want to hit this curb because it will throw the car off. We want to be as tight to it as possible. There you go. So we just slightly clipped it. We're on the inside of the curb. That's okay. You don't want to go over it because you're just going to cause damage to the floor of the car, and the car is just going to bounce up and down and most likely spin. So be careful there, guys. But to carry as much speed through here as you can, you want to be trail braking into the entry. So you don't want to come to a full standstill before you turn into the corner. Key here is to trail brake into the entry, and then as you get to this apex, as per kind of in the first sector, short shift into 3rd gear, because it just gives you that much more control on the throttle. Once again, tight to the apex. Throttle inputs, we're around about half throttle, on, off. And the car bobbles up and down quite a lot through the exit of this chicane. So, be careful. Make sure the car settles very similarly to the first sector. Then on full throttle, trusting the grip in the rear tyres. And then we come up to the last corner. A corner that can catch a lot of people out. You think you've got through the whole track and it's over and done with, and then this last corner can just catch you out. It can ruin your qualifying lap, and it can ruin your race as well. So we're all the way over to the left hand side, and what I am personally keeping an eye out on is there is no visual marker on the left hand side here, because we've just got a curb. There's nothing in the ground, there's nothing on the curb. It's quite difficult. You're just going through reflexes. On the right hand side, however, it's not the best braking marker, but it's a reference at least. As I'm approaching the corner, you can see here on the right hand side, we'll just play it forward. You can see here where the curb ends. So on the entry to the pit lane here, where it's a solid red and white runoff / curb, it ends and it becomes grass and an actual kind of raised curb. That is where I am aiming to brake, or just before it. Actually, I'm not aiming to brake on it, I'm aiming to brake just before it. And you can see there in my peripheral vision, just before it, that's where we brake. That's where we then start to turn in, trail braking round here, keeping it tight as we can round the corner without getting our wheels up, because you'll just lose time and grip. So we want to be on the black stuff. And I personally maintained 4th gear round here. Now, during a race, you're probably going to, throughout the race, depending on who's in front of you or behind you, you may end up shifting down into 3rd gear. That's fine. Just be careful that 3rd gear, you may hit the rev limiter depending on how early you shift down, and be careful on the throttle on the exit. 4th gear is the safest option. It's going to give you the most control through the corner and on the exit of the corner as well. But you can see we're on full throttle as the car is pretty much perpendicular with the apex, and the middle of the car is pointing towards, straight towards the wall. And then full throttle as we straighten the car up, because the rear can get wiggly. Be careful with this runoff here, guys, because it is an off track. And then, as you can see, the DRS is upon you very quickly. And then deploy that DRS, activate it, and you are then across the line. And there we go. That is a lap around the Nurburgring Grand Prix version. So yeah, plenty of corners there that can catch you out. That first sector in particular, it's slow, but you need to be precise, keep it tight, short shift, and yeah, the rest of the track, to be honest, is an absolute joy to hook up. Really showcases the potential of this car and what it has for us, i.e. the high speeds and downforce. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button. Hopefully this will make you more consistent and improve your lap times. Happy racing, and see you next time. Bye.